Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro said on Sunday the country would never default on its debt, a day before debt talks with creditors that will be overseen by two officials under sanction by the United States. Vice President Tarek El Aissami and Economy Minister Simon Zerpa will meet with creditors in Caracas on Monday, Maduro said, contradicting earlier reports that sanctioned officials would skip the meetings to reduce investor anxiety about attendance. The talks are aimed at beginning to restructure about $60 billion in bonds. U.S. sanctions have made it practically impossible for Venezuela to refinance debt because U.S. banks cannot buy newly issued Venezuelan bonds. Restructuring talks are equally problematic because the sanctions bar investors from dealings with several officials on the newly appointed debt commission.
The oceans play a key role in climate change, and it's impossible to separate one from the other, so says the EU Commissioner for Environment, Maritime Affairs and Fisheries. On the Oceans Action Day at COP23, Euronews talked to Carmenu Vela about why ocean protection should be more of a priority in fighting climate change.
The oceans are very much the prime regulators of climate. They are absorbing 90% of the planet's heat. They are absorbing some 30% of the planet's carbon dioxide. They are giving the planet some 50% of the oxygen that we need. They will have to take all the melted ice when it becomes water. So we're getting all these benefits from the oceans.
As the sea absorbs more CO2, it's becoming warmer and more acid. Increases in temperatures have also caused coral bleaching across the world. Around 70% of coral has died in some regions.
French officials say there remains an unprecedented level of internal threat. The statement comes 2 years after militants killed 130 people in coordinated attacks across Paris. With Islamic State losing ground in Iraq and Syria, hundreds of French citizens, and in some cases their children, are expected to attempt to return to France. This leaves the government in a quandary over how to deal with them. On Monday, Emmanuel Macron will pay tribute for the first time as president to the victims of the mass shootings and suicide bombings that took place across Paris and in the city's northern suburb of Saint-Denis. Those attacks occurred on November 13, 2015. They prompted the country to strike back in Iraq, Syria, Libya, and elsewhere.
Trucks enter Gaza at the border with Israel, carrying vital supplies into what is sometimes described as an open prison. Now that the Palestinian Authority has taken back control of Gaza's border crossings, there's mounting hope that more goods will be allowed into the beleaguered strip of land. The 25% tariffs previously imposed by Hamas on Gaza's merchants have already been lifted, meaning lower prices for consumers. A Kia Picanto now retails at €17,000, €2,000 less than before the reconciliation. The economic situation in Gaza will be better after the abolition of the tax we used to pay at the border crossing, making things better for the customer because prices will go down. Cheaper televisions won't be any use to a population left without power for 20 hours a day, however. When the Palestinian Authority stopped paying Gaza's electricity bills last spring, many families resorted to cooking on open fires. The lack of power to Gaza's decrepit sewage plants means that human waste is now pouring into the sea, right next to parts of the coast where locals swim and fish. It remains to be seen whether the reconciliation can bring basic amenities back to the Gaza Strip.
Lebanon's Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri has spoken out for the first time about his resignation in Saudi Arabia last week. He says he made the move in the interests of Lebanon, but he could reverse the decision. I'm here free in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and if I want to come back tomorrow, I can do it. But I have my family here, and I have to protect them. Hariri left Beirut for Riyadh on November the 3rd and resigned the following day in a speech that caught even the closest aides off guard, citing fear of assassination and blaming Iran and its Lebanese ally Hezbollah for sowing strife in the Arab world. The Lebanese authorities believed Saudi Arabia forced him to resign and was holding him against his will. Lebanon, a country long divided by sectarian conflicts, found a rare moment of unity since Hariri's shock resignation at the capital's annual marathon on Sunday. Lebanese of all stripes wanting to come back from Saudi Arabia and to continue his work as premier.
At least 6 people have died and many have been injured in an earthquake in western Iran following an earthquake centered in eastern Iraq. The tremor measured 7.2 and was nearly 38 kilometers deep, but it was felt as far away as Turkey, where residents of Diyarbakir left their homes for safety. Baghdad shook for 20 seconds, but there were longer periods of activity elsewhere in Iraq. In Suleymaniye province, people also left their homes to come onto the streets. The mountainous region is often hit by earthquakes, but rarely of this size.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his Russian counterpart, President Vladimir Putin, will meet for the 4th time in 8 months today. Business communities on both sides are hoping it's an indication of improving relations. In Moscow, restaurant owner Naki Karasan said things had not been easy since relations fell to an all-time low after Turkey downed a Russian warplane at the end of 2015. There were around 3,000 Turkish enterprises before. Now we've got only around 1,500. The maximum trade turnover was $35 to $36 million every year. Now we haven't even got half that. So we need to think how to make this turnover grow in the future. Following the warplane incident, Russia imposed a number of economic sanctions on Turkey, including the suspension of visa-free travel to Russia for Turkish citizens. When we had the visa-free policy, there were plenty of tourists, around 300,000 tourists from Turkey to Russia. Now the tourist flow is very low, and it's affected all types of businesses. When the two leaders meet in the Black Sea resort of Sochi, Syria is likely to dominate talks, but there are those who hope that trade won't be forgotten.
US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed a statement on Syria during a brief meeting at a summit in Vietnam on Saturday, their first meeting since July. Putin again dismissed allegations of meddling in last year's US election. The meeting came at a time of US-Russia relations being battered, and Trump is haunted by the accusations that Putin influenced the election that brought him to the White House.
Добрый день. Это говорит о том, что отношения между
Россией и US relations are still in crisis. The fact that we managed to agree on something even in those conditions, I'm talking about the Syrian statement now, is great, but not enough. On the flight from the APEC summit to Hanoi, Trump spoke to reporters about his meeting with Putin, adding they also spoke about North Korea. Trump said their agreement to support a political solution to Syria's conflict would save tremendous numbers of lives. We did it very quickly, Trump explained aboard Air Force One. He then said, I don't know how many times I can ask him if he meddled in the election, but I pressed Vladimir Putin again and he denied it, and I believe him. Trump added he believed the Russian president was very insulted by it, which is not a good thing for our country.
Un incendio ha arrasado buena parte del complejo arqueológico peruano de Ventarrón, un complejo con casi 4.500 años de antigüedad. Los vestigios que han ardido, descubiertos hace solo 10 años en la falda de una colina, se consideran la expresión arquitectónica primigenia del norte de Perú. El fuego se originó, según todos los indicios, por la imprudencia de unos obreros que estaban quemando un campo de caña de azúcar. Las llamas han destruido buena parte del enclave, así como vasijas de cerámica, documentación y, lo que es aún más grave, la pintura mural más antigua de América, con 2000 años de antigüedad, que aquí podemos ver en unas imágenes de archivo.
Televidentes que nos siguen a final de Informe Internacional. Después de un espacio comercial, nos lo tabaco y deporte CBA junto con el colega Carl Reuter. Sigue con nosotros.